All right, so today we're going to look at multiplying integers and how that works. So if you remember, multiplication is just really repeated addition. So for example, when I have 2 plus 2 plus 2, right, I can rewrite that as the fact that we have 3 groups of 2, which means the same as 3 times 2. So if we use that same terminology, then we can start to make sense of how integer multiplication actually works. So we'll go ahead and make our box again, just like we've been doing. Because when we're multiplying integers, there's basically 4 different types. Our first type is going to be, for example, 2 times 3. So we would use the language that this would be 2 groups of 3. If we were going to draw that out then, it means we have 2 groups of 3. So if we're looking at this, we see that here we have 1 group of 3, here we have 1 group of 3, and that makes our true 2 groups of 3. So altogether, we have 6 floats, right? Because we have 2 groups of 3, and positive 3 is the floats. Our next one is going to look like this. 2 times negative 3, but what we're really going to say is that we have 2 groups of negative 3. So when we look at that, negative 3 is, we use anchors, so that means I have 2 groups of 3 anchors, which then gives us a value of negative 6 because we have, as you can see, 6 anchors. Most people can reason those two out. What gets tricky then is when we start looking at when the numbers are changed around. So for example, one thing you're going to start to learn when you see negative signs is that instead of saying like negative 2, and we talked about this a little bit in class, is that you can actually say this is the opposite of 2. And for the terminology of what we're going to use, we are going to say that we are going to flip two groups of 3. So we would start, we have 2 groups of 3, which means we would have 6 floats. So this is our before. But then we have to flip them to their opposite. So now instead of being 6 floats, we would exchange them to become 6 anchors, and that's why this one gives us a value of negative 6. And then our last type of problem will be negative 2 times negative 3, or what we're going to say is that we're going to flip 2 groups of negative 3. It's kind of like we did in the last one. We're going to draw out our 3 groups of negative 3, so in this case our 6 anchors. So once again, this is our before, and just like this one is our after. We're going to take these and we're going to change them to their opposite or flip them. And that is how we have a value of positive 6 when we multiply negative 2 times negative 3. So if we were going to generalize what we just did here, we can start to look at patterns, and we notice that a positive times a positive is always going to give us a positive. And then if we have a negative times a positive, and since we know that multiplication is commutative, meaning we can switch its order, anytime we have one negative, one positive, we actually end up with a negative value. And then if you have a negative times a negative, you also end up with a positive. So you could almost say if the signs are the same, you end up with a positive, and if the signs are opposite, then you would end up with a negative value.